Oh yeah.
It is like to breathe out. Nice.
Once this video ends, I will start up. All right. Hello, everyone. So there's a ton of attendees, so welcome to everyone who's joined in for the beginner get-together. Hope you guys are all excited for WWDC. I know I am. So I'll get into the point. This get-together is just going to be three amazing speakers of mine, just great friends of mine that truly appreciate what they're doing and how much they are doing for the iOS community, and I'm incredibly thankful for them. So I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can, and I'll give a little intro to them, and then we'll start off with 10 minutes to 15 minutes per speaker, and then 5 minutes of Q&A that people can ask, and we'll get answers from them. So we'll start off with Ryley. Ryley is a senior iOS developer at Nike and has been doing iOS stuff for iOS development for about since 2010, so about 10 to 11 years now. And then after that, we have Sai, who is an indie developer working on an app called Airgift, which is a really cool AR app, AR social media app. And on top of it, he's a student and WWDC scholar. And then lastly, we have Chris, who is a independent app developer for the app called Nihongo, and he's been an incredible developer working with startups, big companies, and now working full-time on Nihongo as an indie developer. But we can get into it and start with Ryley. I don't hear you.
I think Ryley's on mute.
I am. Sorry. I was trying to share, but it's not working. So you know what? We're just going to scrap this. That's fine. All right. Hi, everyone. This is a little bit of an odd talk for me, only because I'm used to giving talks about programming and not about how I started in programming. For beginners, this is my own personal story, and everyone's going to have different ones. However, for right now, let me give a little bit about myself. I'm a senior iOS developer for Nike. I've been working at Nike now for a total of 6 years. This is my second stint at Nike, but I left and came back. Right now, I'm focusing on the flagship Nike app, but in the last 6 months, I've given a lot of work towards authentication for the Nike app, sneakers, NTC, NRC, Nike Run Club, Nike Training Club, and all the onboarding experiences there. So that's the team that I'm leading right now. So anything that happens before you actually see the content, that's what I'm focused on. I used to be on the core components team at Nike, which handled shared features like profile that shows up in every app, networking, telemetry, analytics, that kind of thing. Before that, I worked on the retail side. So if you ever went into a Nike retail store, you'd see, like, if you checked out on an iPod, that's what I worked on for 2 years. And it has a special place in my heart because that was a lot of work went into refactoring that from the ground up. And it's pretty cool now, I think. Before that, worked for a couple of startups, like a place called Vadio, which was video radio. Vadio, really clever name. They did exactly what you think, and whatever radio song was playing, they showed the music video for. It was acquired shortly after I left by by Sony. And then after that, I worked for a place called TrapIt, which was the offshoot of another Siri core component architectural company. So Siri broke up into two companies, and one of them went to make Siri, which was gobbled up by Apple, and one of them went to make this, which was machine learning for brands to show articles that matter to your employees. However, none of that really applies to how I got here. So that's what I wanted to kind of get into now, because some of you out there want to get started in iOS, and that's not super clear because it's not an emerging market. Like, everybody knows what an iOS app is, but it is not super clear. Like, if you went to college and said, all right, I want to be an iOS developer, what do I do? And they're going to say, I don't know, take CS and then move on, right? Like, there's not a clear path, and I'm not going to give you one, but I will give you mine. I started out doing computer science in high school. We had one class, and it taught VB plus technically, and we made a game kind of like Lights Out, where it had a 3x3 matrix of buttons that you had to turn all at once. It was really simple, but it was really fun for me. And he actually said, hey, when you go to college, you might think about trying computer science. And I was like, nah, I'm going to be chemistry. I'm going pre-med. Let's go. And I started. I went to college. I was in chemistry. I was loving it. It was really great. But I was a poor college student, so I had to try and get a job. I talked with my TA, and he set me up with a group that was in chromatography, which at that time was testing the resilience of different sunscreens. And you're like, all right, why is this guy talking about this? Well, it's because I was given a really low income job here that let me try to automate my job away, because at the time I had to stay up overnight and look at it in a microscope and see if the color in the microscope looked really close to the key, and I would mark down what the color was. And I thought, this is getting really old, because I would get up once every hour, and check about 50 different microscopes, which was hard on my soul. So I called my dad up, who was in computer science, and thought that it would probably be better if I would automate this. And so I was like, all right, how hard could an app be? This was back in 2009 and 2010 maybe. And it was iOS 2 or 3 at the time that I was like working in, and not a lot of APIs were available. Right now, you could go into Core Image, like there are so many different camera SDKs, but at the time there weren't. And so I actually started getting some things. I got into the camera, I could set it up and take a picture, and I was like, all right, that's something. So finally I set up a timer. I did some swizzling, which you guys may or may not know about, but it's a little bit dangerous, just because if you swizzle something you shouldn't, things can crash. But I did some things, I made it work, and I kind of jerry-rigged a camera, and I put it up to the microscope, and it would take a picture once an hour for 8 hours basically while I was sleeping. And this went on for about a week, and I thought, all right, I need to do a little bit better. I wonder if it could just give me the results at the end of the day. And so I started making the app a little bit better and more like useful to me. And finally my TA and the teacher said, hey, what are you doing here? Why are there 8 iPods set up around the thing? Why did you use, like, I got a little bit of funding after that. And so we made this app. We actually released it on the Oregon State University like app certificate at the time, which was pretty cool for me. It was an app. I wasn't in computer science. I was a chemistry person, but it was like my gateway drug into iOS development. It was like, hey, this actually is useful, even though the app itself would only be used by colleges, but it was used. It was really cool. So after that initial conception, I moved on. I could sleep through the night. I could still do all the tests. They bought more iPods. They set it up, and to this day, they actually use a more sophisticated version of it, but they still use the app, which I'm pretty proud of. It's been, I don't know, what, 11 years, right? That's a long running app to be continually upgraded. After that, I decided that maybe computer science was something that I cared more about. So I was contacted by a few other science groups. The Specifically, there was a physics one that wanted to try to get beginners physics up to date with some of the things that how things work. That one was a little bit harder, but we got a couple other people in. We made an app, sent it out. It was done. The first time I made money was again from Oregon State. They wanted the My Plate initiative from the government, which was if you ordered something on campus, it would tell you like what food groups that you ate from and the percentage that you're supposed to eat. Um, and that was kind of like, all right, I think I'm done with chemistry. Even though I loved it, I wanted to move into computer science. And so I did. I moved from chemistry to computer science, and I was a year behind at that time. So I had to like make up credits. But I realized that computer science was like the way to go. Engineering in general was problem solving, right? So we made a few other things. I created a thing called a group called the OSU App Club General. There was a specific naming convention that we had to follow, but it was an app club at Oregon State. And it was really fun because we got quite a few people to join. We learned, we got Microsoft came by, Apple came by. We made, I think, I don't know, let's say 30 apps that were arguably useless. I'm going to say it, but it was really fun because we learned so much about how to do app development from other people and how they approached it. And let me tell you, none of it was the same. But the key was if you had a vision, you could make it happen on a phone or a tablet. So after that, I thought, all right, we're in the club space. That's fine. But are we really going to make money? And I haven't told this specific part because some don't appreciate it, but making money from an app versus having a job is really hard. And there are some indie developers that do it really well. I'm not one of those people. So when I was tasked with, in my head, after college, what do I do? I had a couple internships. It was really fun. One, I worked for a company that did digital watermarking, which is like if you lit like Shazam was an example. They trademarked it from these other people, but it was all C++, no mobile development. It was just Fourier transforms on sound, but they made money. So I was like, all right, how could I make something that another company would buy? Because that's what they did. And so I made a thing when I was at a party with a bunch of other engineers because we were super cool. We were talking about app ideas at the beginning of all of this. And one of them was when you're at a party, how could you create a queue where everybody could add music to it? And so we would add music to this thing called DJ Pi Rye. My name's Ryley. So yeah, and we ran it on a Raspberry Pi. So anybody with a Spotify account on the local Wi-Fi could add songs to it. That was eventually bought out by other people, which I thought was really cool. And after that, we thought, all right, that's what I'm going to do for my senior project. I'm just going to make apps. We've been doing it for a couple of years. I got to do it now. So we made an app hackathon, which now everybody has heard of hackathons, but at the time it was fairly new in the app world. So I got, I think, 30 different college age kids, and we made a bunch of apps over 3 months. And some of them were actually really, really cool. And we gave our senior presentation and all that stuff. The killer part was we got into the school paper, and then that was picked up by the Oregonian. When that ran in the Oregonian, I had a manager from Nike call the school, who then called me and said, hey, would you like to interview at Nike? So I interviewed at Nike. I was like, sure, I'll go see what it's all about. And this person was, he's now the VP of Wayfair for technology, or CTO, so something high up in the engineering space in Wayfair. But he wanted to pay it forward because one time he had been given the chance to show his engineering skills off, basically when he had no experience. He looked at me and he's like, all right, you obviously have some sort of drive. You have a bunch of side experience, even though you have no real world experience, which I didn't. And he gave me the chance to come work, and we made the first version of sneakers in 6 months. So I was hired on at Nike. I was still full-time at Oregon State working remotely back before COVID, right? But I worked really hard to learn iOS development professionally, because before that it was all hacked together off of Stack Overflow, right? So I guess that's my journey. Was I got lucky because I worked really hard on trying to make a bunch of different things work and stick and learn. And I think that's my takeaway here, is that you got to learn a bunch just trying things, right? I think that taking classes is wonderful, but if you try to apply it to a specific part of your life that makes sense to you, that will take you way farther than having 100 not like started projects that weren't finished. If you have 2 projects that are finished and out there, people will take notice. And I think that's really fun. And the other part is to pay it forward. So my old manager, Christian, he gave me a chance. And now I've hired, I don't know, a lot of more junior engineers than I thought I would ever be in the place to do. So that's all I'm trying to say to you is learn a little bit more, apply it, and you don't have to have 100 side projects. Even if you have one, it shows that you have just this much more than the next person. And I really got to give that like a shot, because I think it's really important. So I think I'm out of time, but thank you all for listening.
Awesome. Thank you for the great talk. I wish I knew that when I started. But before we move into the next speaker, what we'll do is we'll do 3 speakers back to back. And in the meantime, we'll have time for people to do a Q&A. So let me just get the window right for sharing it. And then I'll put up the QR code that people can look at, or you can check the chat through the Gather app or website. So just check the chat, see if, and through whatever questions you have, you can sign this or you can scan the QR code or check the chat to find the Padlet link. And in there, just ask whatever questions you have, and we'll get back to them after the speakers are done talking. And I'll just leave this up for a second so people can scan it, and then we'll go back and transition to the next talk, which is Sai. And then if this QR code doesn't show that well, there's also another one through the stream in the bottom corner, which will stay there throughout all of the talks. But until then, let's move to Sai. Oh, I was muted.
All right. Cool. Yeah. Let me pull up my slides here. It's funny. It's just now my whole system kind of rebooted, and I was kind of like, but all right. So I think I have this ready. Let's share the window, sharing my slides. All right. Cool. All right. So hi everyone. My name is Sai, and I'd just like to share these 6 lessons I've learned by being an iOS developer from the past 6 years, and being just someone who codes from the past 10 years. So to get started, I'll just give a quick introduction about myself. So I'm a 19-year-old developer and UI designer. I am a student at University of California, Santa Cruz, where I'm double majoring in computer science and cognitive science. And nowadays, I'm building Airgift, which, as Umar mentioned, it's an AR-first social networking app that's backed by many Apple technologies like ARKit for augmented reality and Core ML for machine learning. And I'm really into the machine learning and artificial intelligence space as well, which you will be hearing more about. But specifically in regards to Swift, I've been developing for iOS and Swift since 2015. So it's been 6 years. And I feel like I've really been a part of the iOS community from 2017. And so I just want to share just a couple of the lessons I've learned. So we'll just start at the beginning, 2001 to 2014. So I was born in California, and I come from an IT family. So I had a very vague idea of what coding was growing up. And I remember I would be really fascinated by coding. And I remember as a kid, I would tell my dad a sentence, and then he would write a for loop in C++. And I remember seeing the statement being printed to the terminal, just those white characters against the black terminal. And I thought that was really fascinating. But at the time in the United States, there were no CS courses in my particular school, and CS education wasn't as advanced as what it was today. But I always had that engineering mindset and had that interest towards computer science. And so when I was 10 years old, the family moved to India. And at the time, India was a lot more, I should say, it had a lot more, introduced computer science to students at a very young age. So I started learning about building websites with HTML and CSS. And the following year, actually, I learned Python, which, as we know, right now, Python is a simple yet powerful programming language for data science and machine learning. But at the time, it was just a very simple scripting language, and it wasn't as well supported as it is today. And so I really enjoyed coding in Python and learning about this thing called development. And the problem was I really couldn't build anything visually appealing because there's only so much you can do with scripting languages. And again, this was before we had libraries like TensorFlow, which is a library to do machine learning. But then I basically decided that Python was great, but it was only limited to scripting. And then in 2014, we moved back to California again. And so that's kind of like 2001 to 2014. And I guess the first lesson that I want to share is discover what type of learner you are. So there are basically 4 types of learners: visual learners who do great and they can absorb information when there's charts and graphs. There's auditory learners who do great by listening to lectures or just audio information. And then there's people like me who are kinesthetic learners or hands-on learners and who need to be building something and they get really fidgety really quickly. And then the 4th type of learner is reading and writing learners who do great just reading a book or just writing about something. And no one fits into a perfect box really, but just trying to understand what works for you best is the best way you can learn how you can absorb information quickly and efficiently. But then we transition into 2015 and 2016 where I get introduced to Swift. So I dive into iOS development because I come across this course on Udemy, which was Rob Percival's The Complete iOS 8 and Swift course. And this was my first introduction to mobile application development. So I fell in love with iOS programming because it was so cool using storyboards, and you could drag a label onto the storyboard and you could have it run on your phone. And in 2016, I took the iOS 10 version of that course. And to this day, if any beginners usually ask me, like, how do I get into iOS programming? This is the course I lead them to. It's really good. And every year, him and his instructors release a updated version. So I'm sure there'll be one for iOS 15 this year. And I also discovered in 2016 the WWDC scholarship, or as it's known today, the Swift Student Challenge. And I remember discovering the WWDC scholarship, I think almost 3 days before the due date was announced. So I was debating if I should apply because it might be really last minute. And in the end, I chose not to apply, but I promised myself that I would spend the rest of the year working on a bunch of small projects and keep refining my Swift knowledge, and that I would apply in 2017. And so like one of the projects I worked on was Indie Cooks, which was a project for my school actually. And it was just a very simple app that was just a recipe cookbook app for Indian cooking recipes. And as I said, I'm a kinesthetic learner. So I learned a lot just building that app. And you often hear this from many other instructors too, is that the best way to learn something, especially when it comes to technology, is to build it yourself. So the second lesson is to just apply and to just do it. Ryley, who works at Nike, just do it. But it's just that I look back now and I really regret not applying in 2016. I really felt like I should have just done it because I had nothing to lose. And so if an opportunity comes across your way, just go for it. And then in 2017, as I promised myself, I applied for the WWDC scholarship. I built a chatbot, and I use the word chatbot really loosely because it was actually just almost 2,000 lines of if-else statements. And it was a chatbot that would tell you jokes and give you quotes. And it was, I mean, I was really surprised that I got in, and I was mind blown by seeing how many developers there were from all over the world. We know it as the Worldwide Developers Conference, but it really doesn't hit you until you're there in person. And I was meeting all of these developers, and I made tons of friends who were from all over the world. And even to this day, even though we haven't met since 2017, we're still really close. And if I ever have any questions or want to talk to them about app development, they're the first group of people I reach out to. And even apart from WWDC, it was a gateway into several opportunities. I was able to get my first job as a tutorial writer for AppCoda, which if you've been developing in iOS or if you're going to start, you will eventually come across this site. I reached out to Simon, who's the head of AppCoda, and told him that I just introduced myself. I said, I've been programming for X amount of years, and I'm a WWDC scholar, and I would love to write some tutorials for your site. And he, I'm so grateful he took me on. And my primary specialization was on Core ML, and in the following years, the Create ML and Turing Create, which were machine learning tools that are offered by Apple to developers. And also, I got into Twitter, which I think is probably the best social network for learning and and discovering iOS developers. I started to use Twitter to share what I was learning, and I would tweet articles, follow other iOS developers, and then even see what other people were doing and just get to know them. So the third lesson is to network. And back in 2017, I was actually really introverted. But by attending events like these and just trying to be more active in the community, I kind of grew outside of my bubble. And now I really enjoy meeting new people and getting to know them and learning from them. And so 2018 to 2020 is, I like to call it 3 steps forward, 1 step back. So in 2018, I applied again, and this time I actually did use some machine learning in my submission. I created rock, paper, scissors, but instead the camera would detect the gesture you had. And I would also use a little AR to show the scores. And by now I thought I had a really good understanding of the scholarship, and I was going to get in for the rest of my life. But I applied in 2019 and I got rejected. And this was a big crash to this iOS euphoria I've been having the past few years. And I was really surprised. And, I was feeling really rejected. But, after careful contemplation, I decided that I shouldn't let it get to me, and that, I would just work harder and I would apply again the next year, which was 2020. So last year. So last year I applied and I got in. So what I created was Mirrorly, which was a mental health journaling app that could track your moods and predict your emotions with a personalized machine learning model. And so I was just really grateful that I didn't let this one kind of setback, stop me from coding iOS forever. And that's the fourth lesson, which is that setbacks are really launch pads for you and they're not explosions, to use a rocket analogy. I've seen many talented developers who might get rejected from a job or be denied an opportunity like the Swift Student Challenge. And then it leaves a sour taste in their mouth, and then they choose not to apply the following years. But I feel like that isn't the best move, and rather you should learn from your setbacks, and you should learn to get over it and focus on what lessons you can learn to push yourself upwards. And I've been kind of charting my progress in a linear fashion, but I'll kind of talk about the apps I've been developing in the background. I think, as I've said, the best way to learn is by doing, and passion is really important whenever you're building something. So before WWDC 2018, but after my first dub, I launched the Views News, and it was my first app on the App Store. And at the time, it was a really simple news application. It wasn't, impressive technologically or anything, but I was just really passionate about this app, and so I put it on the App Store. And later that year, I launched Base SMS, which is a spam SMS blocker. On a trip to India, I got bogged down by spam SMS messages, and I was like, maybe I should build something that could filter out these spam messages. And then in 2019 and 2020, I worked a lot on Views, which was rebranded into Views 4. And today it's in kind of like the top charts of news applications, and it has a lot more features now than just being a simple news reader. And I was also able to turn my WWDC or my Swift Student Challenge 2020 playground into an app called Mirrorly. And so the fifth lesson is really to build something you're passionate about. And you often hear this, that people say the App Store doesn't need another weather app or another news app, but I disagree with this. I think you don't need to create the most innovative apps. You should start with something you believe in. And as you continue to pour your heart and soul into your projects, you're going to receive feedback from other people on how you can improve your apps. And as you continue to work on it, you will see ways how you can make your app, how you can make your app distinguish itself from the other competitors on the App Store. Yeah, and then so the last section is really hindsight is 2020. I decided to step outside of the ecosystem in 2019 after my rejection from the WWDC 2019 scholarship. So I went back to web development. I learned about all these new tools now called Angular and React and how they help with web development rather than using plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And this actually helped me in acquiring an internship for this summer at Disney. And also, I decided to take a look at Android development. And I saw tools like Flutter and React Native. And probably my favorite tool is, or cross-platform tool is Flutter. And Flutter is a tool where you use one code and it can deploy the app on websites, iOS, macOS, Android, Windows. And don't get me wrong, I'll still pick SwiftUI and Xcode any day, but I think it's really fascinating how there are other tools as well. And as an indie app developer, you're always wearing a lot of hats. You're wearing developer, marketer, and most importantly, designer too. And I learned a lot about the importance of design. As someone who started out with Python and just from a purely engineer focused mind, I learned about the importance of UI and UX and how it doesn't matter if an app is technologically impressive if users cannot use this app. And so design was very new to me, but I would now argue it's probably one of the most crucial factors in an app. And so I also met Meng, who's in charge of Design+Code at WW 2018. And their courses are great if you want to get into design. And he's been a great mentor for me. And he's graciously accepted me as a part-time instructor to create courses on Flutter and SwiftUI for Design+Code. And nowadays I'm working on Airgift. So every Christmas I had an idea where wouldn't it be really cool if people could send virtual gifts to each other? And last year, catapulted by the pandemic, I decided to make that app. And I toyed with the idea a lot, and now it's a lot more than just a Christmas themed app. But the AR functionality is still crucial, and I'll be talking a bit more about it at one of the open mic sessions later this week. And so the lesson really here is to not label yourself, right? Always keep stretching out your horizons, and you should just get comfortable with not knowing everything, and you should try to approach everything with a childlike fascination, and that's how you can learn the most. If I always stuck to iOS, I wouldn't have seen these other tools that have helped me so much. And yeah, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'd love to reach out to you. So these are my socials if you have any questions. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome. That was a great talk, and it was really cool to hear a WWDC scholar. Those ideas are always some of my favorites. I think they're doing an announcement in Gather right now, so I'll give them a minute or two to go through that. And then once again, I'll put up the QR code. So if there are any more questions after Sai's talk, people can go and go through that QR code and add some questions there, and we'll go through it at the end. But until then, we'll give them a minute or two and go through their announcement. Okay, their announcement is done, and we'll get back into the last but certainly not least presentation with Chris on Nihongo and
Great.
his journey.
Great. Let me share. Let's see if we can get this going. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Chris. I'm an indie app developer and the creator of an app called Nihongo, which is a Japanese dictionary and study tool. And they're all around app for people that are learning Japanese. I've been an indie app developer for about 2.5 years. And before that, I spent about 10 years as a software engineer at various tech companies in the San Francisco Bay Area. But my journey into indie app development didn't begin with Nihongo. It actually began with video games. So I've always been really into video games, and I played a lot as a kid, and I play a lot today. And when I first started learning to code, I started by making little game prototypes. So I really got into taking some game I was playing and trying to see if I could make it. So I made a little platforming game. I made a little sort of Mario Kart style racing game, a little strategy game, just kind of making the core engine of these things and trying to see if I could make them. And so I really enjoyed doing that and quickly fell in love with the idea of being an indie game developer. And I basically decided like that was my path in life, was I was going to become an indie game developer. So my first job as a software engineer, though, wasn't at a gaming company. I got a job at an enterprise security company. And it wasn't games, but I liked my job. I liked the people. I was learning a lot about software development. And I continued making games in my free time on the side. And eventually I launched one of those games, a game called Pipe Drop. I launched on the App Store. And you can actually still up there. You can still download Pipe Drop. It was a mild success. Like I got featured by Apple for about a week on one of their sort of top new games this week. This was pretty early days in the App Store, so I could do. It was a paid upfront app, 99 cents. I made maybe a couple $1,000s on it, and I kind of viewed that as a signal that okay, I'm ready. Like I was able to make this app and make a couple $1,000s off of it. Maybe based on that, I can go and be an indie game developer. Now I know what I need to do. So I saved up and I talked it over with my husband, and we waited until he had a stable job, and then we decided to sort of take the plunge. And I quit my job to become an indie game developer. And I failed terribly. There are a lot of reasons that this totally failed. The first one is, I don't know how many people recognize this. This is the Ouya. And my first big mistake was I went all in on Ouya, which in 2012 was going to be the future of game consoles, bringing an Android-based app store onto gaming on your TV. But spoiler alert, it didn't revolutionize game consoles. It was a huge failure. So that was my first mistake, was sort of banking on Ouya. But more importantly, I basically realized I didn't actually know the first thing about designing and launching and marketing a quality product. I kind of, in retrospect, got lucky with Pipe Drop because the App Store was new. It wasn't that hard to get into, to get listed by Apple, and the model was still these paid upfront apps. So I was able to get a lot from that. But I basically, in retrospect, like I didn't make a significant amount of money after the Apple feature was done. So I never really learned how to build any sort of momentum, have any successful marketing outside of just getting featured by Apple. And in retrospect, I totally wasn't ready to be to try and do this on my own and go and launch that. So I ended up going back to school, and I actually studied Japanese full time. And while I was studying, I found myself sort of dissatisfied with the apps that were out there on the market and wishing there was. I found a problem that I wanted to solve for myself. And I started working on the side. And the problem basically was I had a dictionary app and I had a flashcard app. And I wanted to be able to study the words that I was looking up in the dictionary app in video games or manga or in a book or TV show or something, study those words in my flashcards. And nothing was really doing that right. So I built something, just a little app for myself to fit that one need. And I ended up finding that I really loved this workflow where I'd be studying. I was, still in school, so I would be studying, and then I'd notice that um, you know, I wanted to display a kanji or like a character a different way that I thought would be more intuitive, or I really wished the flashcards worked a certain way. And I was able to just stop studying, take out my laptop, spend an hour sort of poking around in X and keep on, and then go back to studying. And just this workflow of being able to like have something that I was actively using every day and really enjoying, and that rapid iteration was so satisfying. And then I think the fact that it was, really just something that I wanted for me. So I did eventually put that on the App Store, but it didn't really have any users, or not very many. And I kept developing it, but it was mostly for me. But I did eventually actually have to get a job again. So I got a new job, and again, it was in the sort of enterprise security space. That's where I had connections, and I got another job there. And I was still interested in indie development, but I wasn't really in a rush to drop everything and jump right back into it. And this time around, I kind of knew that there were a lot of skills that I was missing the first time around. And I sort of finally figured out that, oh, wow, like if you want to be an indie, you have to do everything. And there's a lot of skills that you need that's beyond just what you'll get as sort of a core development job. So this time around, rather than trying to forge my path towards being an indie dev by focusing on my side project work, like I did with PipeDrop, where I felt like working on PipeDrop on the side was sort of my primary thing that was going to help me become an indie game dev, I tried to forge my path towards being an indie by really expanding my focus on my day job and taking advantage of the fact that there were a bunch of people at the company that were experts in all these different things that I needed to know as an indie developer. So in addition to my core sort of development work, I tried really hard to engage with all those different teams in my company and to learn from them. And it turns out my company was actually really pretty excited about this too, because they wanted, to develop more connections across different teams so they could, work together better. And so really it ended up being kind of a win-win. So I'll talk a little bit just about some of these skills that I feel like I developed. The first one is design. I was able to work with designers at my company and try to really get myself engaged, even though I was still a developer, try to work closely with them and get engaged in that development process. And I learned to do things like make mockups and prototypes and do user testing. And all of that has come really in handy. Quality. We had a team, a quality team at the companies that I worked for, and being able to learn how to make test plans that cover, make sure that your entire product is working correctly, learning about test automation tools, and learning just these skills that, QA engineers or testers have developed, skills on how to actually try to break an app and find the ways, the flaws and things. And so I learned a lot about how to ensure the quality of an app through working with them. Security was another important skill that I learned. We had a security team that was in charge of basically anytime a new feature would come out, they were sort of supposed to give a go-ahead that this had been vetted to not have any big security, vulnerabilities or holes in it. And so trying to work closely with them to learn about encryption and some of the most common security vulnerabilities that they see and how to go about finding them. And that's been a really valuable set of skills to learn. We also had a tooling team that was responsible for developing things like continuous integration, servers and that setup, and some of our release flows. And I think really diving into that, I use continuous integration, which, if you're not familiar with it, is basically having a server running that will be constantly building your app and running tests against it on every check-in. So being able to learn about that software and learn about best practices for using that, because again, this is another skill that you're going to need and have to do on your own if you want to be an indie. And last, marketing. I worked with a team. We had a special team that was actually just dedicated to sort of the sales flow and the marketing website, and being able to work with them and get access to a code base of a live, professionally made website was, even that alone was really useful, just to sort of understand the structure and things like that. Learning how it works, learning about web design and how to design effective calls to action, things like that. Learning how to do A/B testing, and learning about different sort of growth tactics for how to drive customers, via your website to your app or to your product. So all of these were skills that I had kind of glossed over during that first attempt at being an indie, that I ended up being really glad that I took the time to try to develop. So during this whole time, I continued to develop Nihongo on the side, and I eventually decided to start getting serious about trying to make money from it. And we waited, kind of did the same thing again. We waited until my husband had a stable job, Nihongo had a decent income, and we had enough in savings to comfortably last about a year without me having a job. And the idea was that we would go, I'd give myself a year, and if I could make Nihongo sort of successful enough to make enough money to live off of in that time, I that was great, and I'd keep doing it. But otherwise, I'd go back and, after a year, I'd go and get a job again. And I'm happy to say it's now been about 2.5 years, and we're still afloat. So I'm not making a ton of money. Like, it's not as much as I made as a professional software engineer, but it's enough to support ourselves, and that's kind of what matters to us, and supports that lifestyle and that workflow that I talked about, of just working on something that you care about and that you're passionate about. So the path to success, or the path for Nihongo, has been really slow. I just wanted to share this. This is the sort of revenue chart for Nihongo since launch. I launched in July of 2014, and for the first couple of years, it basically made almost no money. So I share this just because I think sometimes I see shared on things like on Indie Hackers, if you're familiar with that, or different places. There's lots of highlighting people that have sort of gone, had some idea and built an app or service, and they're making, $10,000 a month after 3 months or something. And I just kind of want to highlight that that's was not at all my path, and I definitely took a sort of slow and steady approach to it, and that's really worked out for me. So just my closing thoughts here, it would be just find something that you can build for you. I wouldn't really recommend trying to just seek out a product idea that you think is going to be particularly profitable, or rather just aim for something that you think will make a lot of money. I'd find something that you want to build for yourself. At least that, for me, just made the whole process so much more enjoyable. If you want to be an indie, I highly recommend trying to find those opportunities to expand your skills. And if you're just starting out in iOS development, or just starting out in a software engineering job, you might not be jumping into that right away, but I think trying to look for those opportunities to expand your skills, if you feel like you might want to do that in the future, you have plenty of opportunities to find that, at normal sort of software engineering jobs. And my last one is just, take your time. It's not a race. Everybody kind of gets where they want to go at a different pace. And that was certainly true for me. And that's it.
Awesome.
Yeah, let me stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. That was a great talk. I love seeing, all the steps from beginning to end, and all the more complexities that come with being an indie. It's not just an easy path, but I think that was the end of our talks. That was fantastic. I'll share my screen again to show just a thank you page. And on top of it, we'll move into questions. I see a couple questions are up, so we can start with those. So the first question I see, feel free for anyone to answer, is, let me find it again.
I think I saw one about where to start with SwiftUI.
Yeah, I think the first one I saw was, what are some great resources for learning SwiftUI?
Can I take first stab at this real quick?
Go for it.
Everybody knows Paul Hudson should be the first one that you try out. I think Ming To, I'm not sure how to say that quite perfectly, but Meng Tu, is that what it was?
Yeah, it's Meng, yeah.
Okay, so we took that as a course. So there were 15 of us at work that all took the course at the same time just to make our entry into SwiftUI a little bit easier. And it was really incredible. It was really cool just to see somebody else that took the design to SwiftUI approach, which is the opposite from what other people do, which is, all right, programmatically, how do we make SwiftUI happen? He went the other direction, which was design to programming instead of programming from design. It was really cool. So those are the two things that I would say.
Yeah, and I think Design Code does have a lot of support and pricing that is accessible to students and other ways for people to get a good background into other things. And then on top of it, Paul Hudson is going to have a ton of resources, especially as the WWDC rolls on. He'll have a ton of resources for each day. And then the second question I saw was, I think this is more for Sai, given that it's a Swift playground, but the question is how to get started with a Swift playground. I have experience in building apps with Xcode, with the Xcode projects, but I don't know how to start on Swift playgrounds.
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people, there's two types of playgrounds, Xcode playgrounds and then the actual Swift playgrounds app that Apple has been working on. And if you've been developing in Xcode, you'll find the transition to Xcode playgrounds really easy because it's pretty much the same thing. It's just your file hierarchy is a little different. But as for Swift playgrounds, actually, I recommend using the app a bit. They have all these really cool templates where they have some code that's already there, and you can play around with the code and make your own edits to see how it's working. And also, the Apple developer website, actually, there are some great talks from previous WWDCs about Swift playgrounds, and I think that's a good resource to get started with Swift playgrounds.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think when I did the student challenge, I did the same thing, just use the Swift Playgrounds app and the templates from there and use those resources from there. One other question I saw was, as a beginner, should I start learning SwiftUI or UIKit first?
I mean, UIKit, I don't know if anyone else is going to say it, but SwiftUI isn't available for a lot of people right now because it requires iOS, I think 13 plus, and a lot of larger companies still require 12 or even 11. UIKit will give you good fundamentals that you'll be able to use forevermore. Well, not forevermore, but maybe at least for the next 5 years. SwiftUI is super cool, but right now, like widgets, maybe some watch stuff, and I think the apps are awesome, but you'll need to at least support old code that was written in UIKit at a minimum.
Yeah, I think you're still gonna find places where you're gonna run into problems with SwiftUI just because it's not fully you can't do everything with it yet. So I'd still tend to recommend UIKit right now, just because I think you can get kind of 80% of what you want, or maybe 90% of what you want with SwiftUI, but then getting that last 10% can be really, really hard. And I think especially if you're not familiar with UIKit, that's going to be really tough because you might have to drop into UIKit to sort of fill some of those gaps. So I tend to still recommend UIKit right now at least for now.
Even at least passing knowledge of Objective-C might be nice. I still have to do that. So Swift is great. Objective-C sometimes still might be necessary.
I think also Objective-C will also look really good on a resume.
That's true, and also there are, as much as none of us said it, applying for a job at a larger company, you will still have to go through things kind of like LeetCode. I haven't found a place that doesn't ask for either a sample project, or B, LeetCode answers. While I don't do that stuff every day, if you interview, you'll have to go through that. So it wouldn't be terrible that if you're about to start interviewing, go do LeetCode stuff. I don't think it's representative of what we do on a day-to-day basis, but it is definitely representative of what you will interview with.
A little sad, but true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know how else to say that without sounding sad.
One of the other questions that was asked, and this one was for Sai, can you suggest best resources to get started in ARKit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I myself am still learning a lot about ARKit, but the best resources I've been using have been this YouTube channel called Reality School or Reality Kit School. It's by Ryan, and he posts these amazing videos on using Reality Kit and SwiftUI. I think that's a really amazing resource. More importantly, Ray Wenderlich, actually, he has open sourced all of his deprecated books. And so one of the books is ARKit by Tutorials. And even though the code no longer works with Xcode, a lot of I'm sure you can still get the code working, and you can kind of modify it to the newer Swift versions. And those two resources have been immensely helpful. And I think, Stack Overflow, I know there's always a mixed opinion about Stack Overflow, but for those really niche specific stuff, like how do I get this object to rotate in this way, occasionally you do find a gold mine in Stack Overflow regarding this specific, something really specific. But yeah, I hope that helps.
I just saw a question that I'm just going to answer real quick. Yes, most companies will allow you to interview or submit applications without a CS degree. My last lead was someone with a geography degree, and the one before that had no degree at all, but had 15 years in computer science. So I haven't ever had a lead with a college or with a CS degree yet, and I have been here for 10 years. So just want to throw that out there, that a CS degree is not necessary. I'm in CS and math, but I have yet to use my math degree. It's just not necessary. But it was really fun. That was a good time of my life. But no, it's not necessary.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes left, so we can do maybe 2 quick lightning questions. One of them was, how do you remember everything you learned as an indie? And the other one is, have you ever considered putting aside or not going too wildly while following your passions? Or do you think you were limiting your passions for having a backup plan? So we can answer those and then we'll give our thank yous.
How do you remember everything? I mean, I don't I don't remember everything as an indie. I guess if the question is developing all these skills, a decent amount of it is internalizing things and learning the right resource to look for. I mean, maybe that's the best answer, is probably that a lot of it is getting the overall sense of how to do something, and then learning the right resource to look for so that if you need to do it again, you can find that again. Learning the right tools to use was big. So in learning how to design, it was learning the right tools, learning the right sort of general mindset and workflow. But, we all have to look things up again, and it's definitely not all permanently, in your head.
Yeah, I'll just say I didn't follow my passion. I followed where the money was, which was iOS development, which I do love. I have a passion for it, but making a shoe app probably wasn't my passion. So I think I went away from Chris, which I look up to Chris because he actually did something that he loves and does every day. So credit to him. That's what I'm saying.
Thanks.
No, seriously, I was the backup plan. So there you go. There's your two examples. There is I didn't follow the game app plan that I wanted to. I'll just answer one quick. Collection views. Go if you want to learn something common frameworks, go learn collection views. That's what's used every single day by every single person in every app. Collection views. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Not table views. Collection views.
All right. I think we are just about out of time, but I wanted to give a huge thank you to everyone who joined and saw the get together. I hope you guys are all as excited for Dub as we are, and hope you guys have learned a thing or two. And I want to give another huge thank you to the three speakers. It means a lot to me that you were able to show up and give a great talk. So I do appreciate it a bunch. And upcoming events for the week, we have a bunch of get-togethers starting, pretty much going all week. On Gather, there'll be a ton of people walking around, a lot of ways to be social, even though it's online. But the next one that's starting about now will be a student group get together, and then tomorrow there'll be a watch party and some post WWDC State of the Union meetups. So tons of things to look out for, and a ton of ways for us to meet you guys and interact in different ways through Gather. And so yeah, just wanted to say a huge thank you for everyone showing up and giving those talks and everything, and looking forward to see you guys again in the upcoming week.
Thanks for setting this up.
Yeah, thanks
See
for
you guys.
hosting.
Thanks, everyone.
I know.
Let's just
All right.
leave.
I think we
Yeah.
just leave.
See you guys. Bye.
See ya.